birthday dinner. Good evening. This is Pastor Barbara, aka Preacher with Carrots. Today is the last day of April of 2017. Tomorrow is May 1st, May Day. You know, that's celebrated around the world, and it's especially in countries that used to be Christian that no longer are, and don't celebrate resurrection, don't celebrate what we call Holy Week, and they have nothing to celebrate in the spring, so they celebrate May Day. I have told you that I would remake the video of the death of John the Baptist, having his head cut off and presented to the king, his wife, on a serving platter, a charger. It's very interesting, and it didn't record properly at our last lesson, but because it's interesting, I'm going to make it again, and I think by Wednesday we'll have that. This is Sunday, so that puts us in the New Testament. We're studying in harmony of the Gospels, or the chronology of the Gospels. So when we study a particular topic, if two of the writers of the Gospel speak to it, we study what both of them said. If 3 or 4 do, we study what all of them said. We're going to begin studying now about the feeding of the 5,000. We've just finished with the death of John the Baptist. Matthew 14 and Mark 6 and Luke 9 and John 6. So all of the writers of the New Testament speak about the feeding of the 5,000. I'm going to start. I'm not going to read all of them. I'll read all of one of them and then mention anything that's in the others which might be different. When Jesus heard of it, that would be what? The death of John the Baptist. He departed thence by ship to a desert place apart, and when the people heard thereof, they followed him on foot out of the cities. Remember, we're getting ready to study the feeding of 5,000 people. In some places it says 5,000 men. So we assume that could easily be doubled. Jesus went forth, saw a great multitude, and was moved with compassion toward them, and he healed their sick. And when it was evening, the disciples came to him. Very good deacons, very good assistants, looking out for the people. They came to him. They were not in a city where they could buy bread or fruit or any other food. In verse 15, they say, this is a desert place, and the time is now past. It's late, and we're in the middle of a desert. I was in the middle of a desert Thursday. I had my dog with me. I was gone for 2 days. There was no way I could leave the birds with food and water for that long, but I couldn't leave the dog that long. And my air conditioner's not working. So I have him in a crate, had the windows open. That's why he's in a crate, because he's a little tiny dog. If I left the windows open so he couldn't get out, they'd only be open like that. So I put him in a crate so I could open all the windows, and parked under a tree. But in the desert, you've always got a breeze, but desert nevertheless. This is a desert place, and the time is now past. Send the multitude away, that they may go to the villages and buy themselves victuals or food. In other words, dismiss them, Lord, so they don't feel like they have to stay. Let them go, and let them go buy something. And Jesus said, they need not depart. You give them something to eat. Give ye them to eat. I'm reading from Right now, I'm reading from King James. They said unto him, we have here but 5 loaves and 2 fishes. Remember those details, because when we get into the feeding of the 4,000, it's going to be different. 5 loaves and 2 fishes. He said, bring them hither to me. And he commanded the multitude to sit down on the grass. And he took 5 loaves and 2 fishes. And looking up into heaven, he blessed and brake and gave the loaves to his disciples and the disciples to the multitude. Do you remember? I didn't preach it this year, but in other years, I have preached around resurrection, what people call Easter Sunday, things that happened on that day after his resurrection. He was going down the road, or he attached himself to 2 disciples. They didn't recognize him. He had a glorified body. They didn't recognize him when they saw him. Now, these were not the disciples that were with him every day for 3 years. A disciple is somebody that goes where they can, where you're teaching, and learns from you. But they invited him to come in and spend the night and eat, because it was getting, when it gets afternoon and you're traveling, by that time you got to find a hotel. You don't wait till 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock at night, start looking for a hotel. In those days, by afternoon, they invited him to come in. You know how, do you remember how it was that they knew it was Jesus? They served the food. And it was the way that he prayed for the food that they then recognized that it was Jesus. It said, looking up into heaven, he blessed and brake and gave the loaves to his disciples and the disciples to the multitude. Now here he is talking about the 12 that followed him during his 3.5 years ministry. And they did eat and were filled. You all know that I believe that regardless of how bad I may feel, if I sit down in this chair at 5 o'clock on Sunday or at 7 o'clock on Wednesdays, I believe and I remember when Israel got to the promised land for the first time, they had to cross the Jordan River. The tabernacle had been disassembled and the priests were carrying it. And the first ones that had to go across were the priests that were carrying the Ark of the Covenant. They got up to the water and nothing happened. They put their feet in the water and the water separated just like they did at the Red Sea. Also, I know that the blessing of God takes away the heaviness, the illness, and all of that. The anointing breaks all of those things. And so, when I sit in this chair, regardless of how I feel, it's like me putting my feet in the water. What they're doing is taking out a handful of loaves and fish. But as they give it, they didn't get immediately enough food to feed 5,000 or 5,000 men. They had hands full. But as they gave it, it increased. I know people that are, I've taught in 4 different Bible colleges. I've had students that are waiting to get an invitation to a big church to pastor. But there are places that need a chaplain in a nursing home. You got your home Bible studies. You got a lot of things you can do. You don't have to wait till you've got it all offered to you to do something. I really believe I have never turned down an invitation. Since 1953, so that makes it how many years? You guys can do the math. I have never said no to a small church. I've never said no to children. I've never said no because I got to get in the back of a pickup and use an Indian interpreter to do a service. Never said no. And I believe that as we go, we get more. If they would have waited until they had enough food for 5,000, I think they'd still be waiting. But they took what they had and gave it, and there was more, and then there was more. It was like when Elijah went to the widow woman, and she had enough meal and oil to make bread for herself and her son for one meal, and then they were going to die of starvation. But the prophet said, make it for me and let me eat it. And she did. And the next morning, she didn't have a barrel full of flour and a can full of oil, but she had as much as she had the night before. And she used that, she made that. So it's as we take what we've got and use it in God's service that it becomes more. We don't wait until we have the whole big thing, or most of us would never get where we are. They all did eat and were filled. And they took up the fragments that remained were 12 baskets full. They didn't start with 12 baskets full. They started with 5 loaves and 2 fish. But it multiplied to the degree that they had 12 baskets full left over. And they that had eaten, Matthew settles the question, whether it was 5,000 men or 5,000 men plus women. Matthew says, verse 21, and they that had eaten were about 5,000 men beside women and children. I'm going to read a couple of verses from what the other writers say. Mark says in chapter 6:31, he said unto them, this is getting ready to go out to a desert place, come ye yourselves apart a desert place and rest a while. For there were many coming and going, and they had no leisure time to eat. Sometimes we have to make time for our own needs. And they departed into a desert place by ship privately. And when the people saw them, many knew and ran thither out of the cities and went where they were. Verse 37, he says the same thing. Give ye them to eat. They don't have to go out and buy it. You take care of their needs. How? Well, hey, they were sick. He prayed for them. They got well. Why, now that they're hungry, can food not be prepared for them? And I want to repeat again that we will have a chat for the guests as soon as we finish with this portion of the Bible study. We may do it like before, divide it up in a little while, end one video, have some chat, come back. We also have a bunch, y'all are not able to see our chat box, but we have some that are with us tonight at this moment by virtue of the fact that they've just looked at the first page and we happen to be featured, and we welcome you. If you want to come and visit us, you can become a guest, or you can make an account, but you're welcome. When he had taken up 5 loaves and 2 fishes, he looked into heaven and blessed them, and brake the loaves and gave them to his disciples, and so forth. Luke says in verse 14 of chapter 9, because all four writers of the Gospels mention this particular incident. He said, "Give them to eat. We have no more but 5 loaves and 2 fishes, except we go buy meat for all food." Now, one said bread, one said meat. Which is it? Well, remember that in those days, the word meat meant food. It does not necessarily mean the flesh of an animal. It does now to us, and that's what it says in the King James Version. But meat was a way of referring to food. In other words, instead of saying, "You have any food? Do you have meat to eat?" There were about 5,000 men, and he said to his disciples, "Make them sit down by 50s." This is something that the other disciples didn't mention. Remember in a video I made a couple weeks ago, some of these, this is happening in the year between 33, depending which calendar you're going by. The first one to write the Gospels was Mark, and he wrote in 70, which was the same year that Jerusalem was destroyed. So a lot of time went by. Some are, I think, thinking about and seeing in their mind the exact thing that happened. Others maybe even reacting to how other people reacted to what went on. So there's going to be slight differences. Doesn't mean that anybody's wrong. They're just remembering different parts of something that happened. There were about 5,000 men. He said, "Make them sit down by 50s. Well, he had 12 disciples. 50, 50, 50. You have to have order. This morning in church, the pastor was talking about the disorderly fashion in which the Corinthians were behaving themselves. And you can't do anything. And this comes down to running a church. If you have people getting up and walking around during a sermon, and that's the reason that we cut off all except ops when I'm teaching, then we'll turn it back on. But if we don't, we have no way of controlling who comes in and does what. And it's necessary to have order. You can get more done if you do things orderly. And it doesn't mean that you're worldly or backslidden just because you want to be orderly. And looking up to heaven, he blessed them and brake and gave the disciples to eat before the multitude. Now I'm going to John. They went to Galilee, the Sea of Tiberias, which is another name for the Sea of Galilee. There were 3 languages being spoken: Hebrew, Greek, and a Galilean dialect. So sometimes we get one word, sometimes we get the other, sometimes we get the word Elijah, sometimes we get the word Elias. Same thing. Gennesaret, Tiberias, Galilee, same lake. As a matter of fact, it's a lake, it's not a sea. It is fresh water, it is not salt water. The Dead Sea is a sea, it's salt water. But the Sea of Galilee is really a lake. I can't tell you why it came up Sea of Galilee. That would have something to do with the translator. One of the disciples, now we know who. See, each one gives us something a little different. Not meaning one is right and one is wrong, meaning one adds a little something that the other one didn't add. we're going to find out by John where the fish and loaves came from. It was Andrew, Simon Peter's brother. The two of them were by the Sea of Galilee fishing when God called them to be fishers of men. And Andrew said, there is a lad here that has 5 barley loaves. Now we know what kind of bread. And 2 small fishes. But what are they among many? Well, what God blesses, God multiplies. And when he'd given thanks, he distributed to the disciples, to them that were set down. Well, we know from another writer that they were sitting down in groups of 50. And he said, gather up the fragments that remain so that nothing be lost. We don't waste anything. Now, we're through with the feeding of the 5,000. Either tonight or next Sunday, we get to the feeding of the 4,000. Now we're talking about Jesus is now leaving the crowd. I don't care how much you love people. I don't care how much you're called to work with people. The time comes when you've got to get in your house and close the door and lay down and take a nap, or get in your refrigerator and get something to eat. There comes a time when you have to leave the crowd. If you don't, you're not taking care of yourself. And Jesus needed to refresh himself physically, regain his strength. Remember, he's a child of God, but he's a child of Mary. So he has the same physical needs that you and I have. And like I said, last night I had difficulty with computers. All 3 of them have a problem. And I lost something that had taken me 3 hours to write. Because my Gmail is acting up. I couldn't even bring it all up at once, but I kept going back and I could get something different. And I happened to find some mail that had not been sent out yet. Now, how to get it out of there, I didn't know, but I went ahead and copy and pasted it and put it somewhere else. But I was so tired last night. I think I was just too tired to sleep. So only got a couple of hours of sleep, and I've been up and busy all day. So I'm kind of wiped out. After tonight's program, I need to get some sleep. Now, if some people came over, I'd open the door, I'd let them in, but I wouldn't be a very good hostess, because by this evening, I'm going to need some food, I'm going to need some rest, so forth. Jesus constrained his disciples to get in a ship and go with him on the other side. I have something I want to show you. Let me see if it's in this room. No, it must be over there by the window. I'll go get it. Hang on just a minute. Oh, I keep losing my shoe. These shoes matched what I was wearing, but they're too big. And all of a sudden, I find I'm wearing one shoe and wearing stuck. I'll be right back. I have something I have some things on the piano, but I thought for a while I had this. And we put this up by the cameras and let you get a good look at it. Okay. You see the disciples in the boat. You see Jesus pulling a guy up out of the water. Okay. That's what this is about. The ship was now, well, let me back up. He sent the multitudes away and he went to a mountain to pray. Look, I don't care who the preacher is. And we have some other people who have just come, so I want to remind you that as soon as I finish the lesson, we will turn it on so that everybody else will be able to chat. But while I'm teaching, we turn it off because I don't get distracted that way by trolls or even nice people that don't know how we do things. I don't care how good a preacher you are. I don't care how much you know. I don't care how good you are. I don't care how much education you have. You must be filled yourself before you can give. And in order to do that, you've got to spend some time alone with God. When your car's out of gas, it doesn't go anywhere. Doesn't take anybody anywhere. And when a preacher or a Christian who's testifying to somebody or doing something else for the Lord, if you're not filled, you have nothing to give. And Jesus, being the son of Mary, was a human being like us. When we're wiped out, we need a nap, we need food, we need our friends around us. And then in a little bit, we're ready to go out and do what we have to do. But we must take time to be filled, or we have nothing to give. And Jesus went up to the mountain to pray. And when evening was come, he was there alone. What does this sound like? This sounds like the Garden of Gethsemane, doesn't it? Mark says, he constrained his disciples to get into the ship and go before Bethsaida. And he sent them away, and he departed into a mountain to pray. Sometimes you got to get away from your family, your spouse, your kids, because you have to be filled. You have to be replenished. You can't give out to somebody else what you don't have. John says, when those men, now John, Matthew, Mark, and Luke are called synoptic gospels because they're very similar. It's not unusual for John's writing to be different. John saw things from a more spiritual side. John said, and those men, when they seen the miracle Jesus did, they said, this is the truth, the prophet that should come into the world. They were Jews. They knew Messiah was coming. When Jesus therefore perceived that they would come and take him by force, this is the first we're hearing this happening about his going away, to make him king. Jesus perceived they were going to come and grab him and say, okay, you're king now. Why? They were sick and tired of the Romans running things. The Hebrew Bible tells them Messiah is coming. He will rule the world from Jerusalem. So they were ready to get Jesus and sit him on a throne and say, okay, start ruling the world now. Verse 15, when Jesus therefore perceived that they would come and take him by force to make him king, he departed again to the mountain himself alone. How many people would do anything to be made king? I know people, preachers included, they get a little bit big, then they're asked to serve on committees, they're asked to do this, they're asked to speak here and there, and they're very much what, and then all of a sudden, they're not the person that they were when everybody wanted them to minister them. Why? Because they're so busy being king, they're so busy being important, that they have nothing anymore to give. Now we get to Jesus walking on the water, the piece of art that I just showed you. We have Matthew, Mark, and John. Luke doesn't write about this. The ship was now in the midst of the sea. Well, that's in the midst of the lake. Tossed with waves, and you do get waves on a lake. We've had Lake Arrowhead where I live. It's not that big of a lake. It's 100 feet deep. And it's, I'm 6,000 feet high. It's a mile high, and a mile's what, 5,000, just under 5,200, something like that. It's not that big of a lake, but we've had wind in the winter, and we've had some pretty good waves, even though it's not an ocean. And the Sea of Galilee is much, much bigger than Lake Arrowhead. The ship was now in the sea, and it was tossed, for the wind was contrary. In other words, the wind was not cooperating with the people. And in the fourth watch of the night, they used to have watches by 3 to 4 hours. And if you were a Roman soldier, you worked that period of time. Or if it was your time to watch on the wall and make sure that it was safe while other people slept, that's how long it was. So it was the fourth watch of the night, and Jesus went unto them walking on the sea. He's walking on the water. They're on a ship. When the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were troubled. They said, it's a spirit. Why would they think it's a spirit? Because they know, you know, I know, people don't walk on water. So it had to be a spirit, right? I mean, in their minds. But straightway Jesus spoke to them, and when he did, they recognized his voice. Be of good cheer, it is I, be not afraid. And Peter answered him and said, Lord, if it's you. Like, Peter's never quite sure. He's always got his mouth going before he has his brain in gear. And he said, Lord, if it's you, tell me to walk to you. And so Jesus said, come. And Peter got out of the ship, and he's walking on the water. Peter is walking on the water. Jesus is walking on the water. But when he saw the wind, it scared him. Boisterous. He was afraid, and he began to sink. What happened? Took his eyes off Jesus. Got his eyes on the situation. He sees the wind. Water, deep water. And he sinks. And that's exactly what happens to our lives. What we give our attention to affects us. If we let the people around us and what they do affect us, we're going to sink. regardless what happens, and I'm not saying it's always easy, sometimes it's very hard. Keep your eyes on Jesus and you can walk on water. And immediately Jesus stretched forth his hand, caught him, and said to him, "Thou of little faith, why did you doubt?" Doubt is the opposite of faith. You can't be in doubt and have faith at the same time. When doubt goes, faith can come. When you've got faith and it goes, doubt's going to come. But you can't have both at the same time. And when they were come to the ship, the wind ceased. Why? Because Jesus has control of everything. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and everything that was made by him. And nothing that was made if it wasn't made by him. The wind ceased, and when they that were in the ship came, they worshiped him. Saying, "Of a truth, thou art the Son of God." Who said those same words? The centurion at the cross. He heard the 7 words from the cross. He saw Jesus die. He saw them come and take him down. He experienced 3 hours of darkness. They're only a half a mile from Jerusalem, or less. Some graves have opened with an earthquake, and the veil of the temple has been torn in two. That news did not take long to get out, nor did it take long to get out that some Christians who were dead are now walking around Jerusalem saying, "Hey, I'm back." And he said, the centurion, the military man over 100 people, said, "Verily, verily, this man was the Son of God." When Jesus therefore perceived that they would come and take him by force and make him king. Oh, sorry, reading the wrong verse. And he went up to them in the ship, and the wind ceased, and they were sore amazed by themselves beyond measure, and they wondered. And they considered not the miracle of the loaves, for their hearts were hardened. Hadn't been that long ago that there was enough food to feed 500 men and women and children. But how soon we forget what God can do for us. And how soon we look at the circumstances and their heart was hardened. See if John says anything any differently. When they had rowed about 25 or 30 furlongs, they saw Jesus walking on the sea and drawing nigh to the ship, and they were afraid. Well, we know before they were afraid because they thought it was a ghost. Then they willingly received him into the ship, and immediately the ship was at the land, whither they went. Apparently, John didn't think it was all that important, the fact that Peter had started to walk and went down. He's telling the event, but he's not telling every little detail of the event the same as the others. I'm going to close this video, and we're going to chat for a little bit, and then we'll start another video. We'll be talking about the reception at Gennesaret. We'll be talking about Jesus talking to the scribes and Pharisees about some of the religious things they were doing that were meaningless. And if we have time, we're going to talk about some miracles done in the Decapolis and the feeding of 4,000. We'll see how much we get, but this is a 40-minute video, so I'm going to close it. We're going to open it up and chat, those of us that are here on our live program. And we'll be right back with you all in a few seconds. Until the next video, God bless.